Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the New York City Council hearing on the Committee on Contracts. At this time, please silence all electronics and do not approach the dais. I repeat, please do not approach the dais. If you are testifying today, make sure you fill out a slip at the back of the room with the sergeant at arms. If you need any assistance, please contact the sergeant and we will assist you. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair, you may begin.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the fiscal 2026 preliminary budget hearing for the Mayor's Office of Contract Services, or MOCS. My name is Julie Won, and I am the chair of the Committee on Contracts. And MOCS fiscal 2026 preliminary budget totals $37.8 million, which includes $24.3 million for personnel services to support 222 positions and $13.6 million for other than personal services. This budget is $621,000 greater than the fiscal year 25 adopted budget. Mayor's Office of Contract Services is responsible for overseeing, supporting, and promoting the city's procurement system by discharging the mayor's contracting responsibilities under the city charter, procurement policy board, rules, and applicable local laws. MOCS is authorized to perform pre- and post-audit reviews and to provide all necessary determinations, approvals, certifications related to agency procurement actions. MOCS is also responsible for maintaining the city's central contract registry. When the city is confronted with a crisis immediately, most people think of the frontline workers, police, fire, and healthcare providers, and rightly so. But few consider the importance of people behind the scenes, especially those people who make sure that emergency contracts are vetted and processed in a timely manner so that the frontline workers can provide necessary services. But while the contract process often happens without much public thought, it is very much in the forefront of the minds of the entities whom the city contracts with. And often there are many concerns regarding city's contracting process and MOC's ability to oversee and promote the city's procurement systems, provide necessary audits, and manage the central contract registry. Since the migrant crisis, for instance, nonprofit human service providers, businesses, and even agencies have reported issues regarding delayed payments, lack of transparency, and fraudulent services. Many of the nonprofits who the city relies on to provide our most essential service, such as food provision, shelter, education, and even mental health, are not able to get paid for these services in a timely manner. At this hearing, we plan to examine how MOCS is handling its workload and to understand how the office's budget and headcount adequately provides MOCS with the resources to meet its responsibilities and, most importantly, to allow for timely contract payments, particularly to nonprofits. We will also examine federal funding risks to the city's contracting budget. We hope to get updates on software and system rollouts. Additionally, we will discuss the appointment of agencies' chief nonprofit officers and their effect on agency collaboration. Finally, we hope to get an update on some of the new needs added in this November and adopted plans. I look forward to hearing from the Mayor's Office of Contract Services on ways that the Council could better support its work in this fiscal year. I'd like to thank Contract Committee staff for their hard work, Owen Katowski, Jack Story, Alex Polinoff, and Alex Yablon. I'd also like to recognize my colleagues who are not joining us yet. And before we begin, I would like to ask the committee counsel to swear in the commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. Would the representatives of the administration please raise your right hand if you're able? Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you very much. And back to you, Chair.
Good afternoon, Chair Wan and members of the Contracts Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss Mayor Adams' fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget for the Mayor's Office of Contract Services. With this being my final budget hearing before transitioning, I'm honored to reflect on the accomplishments of this administration and outline a vision for the future. I'm joined today by MOC's Chief Financial Officer, Helga Nyanfor. As an oversight agency, MOCS has a charter-mandated role to ensure that New York City procurement is consistent with applicable rules and regulations. But at the start of this administration, we challenged the traditional approach of ivory tower oversight and reset our purpose with a vision of creating an equitable procurement system through transparency, accountability, and efficiency. The three pillars of this vision are people, procurement reform, and technology. Over 3 years later, our priorities remain consistent and believe that this investment has disrupted historical barriers, increased access for MWBE in small business communities, and ushered many of the city's archaic procurement practices into the 21st century. I'm proud of the immense accomplishments that MOX has achieved towards this vision. New York City's procurement system not only facilitates our ability to deliver vital services to New Yorkers, but acts like an economic engine to our New York City communities. In FY24, New York City awarded over $34 billion in city contracts for goods, services, and construction, representing a 16% decrease in comparison to the previous fiscal year, when the city awarded over $41 billion worth of contracts. Of the $34 billion, human services accounted for 58% at nearly $20 billion, representing a 5% increase in comparison to the previous fiscal year, where the human service sector accounted for $18.9 billion, representing 46% of the total procurement spending. Human services remains a cornerstone of the city's procurement system, increasing 147% since the pandemic. Our nonprofit partners are essential to the delivery of critical service to thousands of New Yorkers. Nonprofit organizations are the lifeblood of New York City Human Services Network, from providing shelter to the homeless and meals to families to supporting older adults and caring for our youngest residents. These groups transform lives daily. Yet they face a persistent and fundamental challenge, getting paid promptly for their vital services, and this administration continues to prioritize our investment in the sector. As a director of MOX, I deeply understand these concerns. Bureaucracies are often seen as faceless systems, but they are composed of people working within complex frameworks of policies and procedures. When these frameworks become misaligned, it's the human service workers who bear the burden, often at a great personal cost. These individuals consistently rise to meet the needs of New Yorkers. Right-sizing this massive ship has been a priority since day one, and we remain focused on that mission. Mayor Eric Adams has announced reforms to streamline the processes and support the nonprofit sector. Just a few. The city boosted pay for 80,000 human service workers with $741 million for a COLA investment, with the human service workforce overwhelmingly female at 66% and 46% women of color. This investment represents a critical step towards delivering pay equity across race and gender for this workforce. The multi-year discretionary contracting reforms. These reforms enable providers to access funds nearly a year earlier than previously. The Joint Task Force recommendations, which was a long list of recommendations needed immensely and jointly by the mayor and the controller's office, and the progress includes expanding access to interest-free loans to the RGF, adding allowance clauses to reduce amendments for routine changes, and simplifying document management. On the legislative front, the city advocated successfully, among many other things, for changes to the public hearings law, shaving approximately 20 days off the procurement process for most city contracts, something that had not been touched since the 80s. And some of the structural solutions for long-term impact include the collaboration and accountability, which are at the heart of our efforts. In December, the administration launched Nonprofit Focus, or Facilitating On-Time Contracting and Urgent Solutions, a working group chaired by Deputy Mayor Anna Almazar and in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Nonprofit Services. This group convenes senior city officials weekly to strategize, review data, and allocate resources effectively. Additionally, Mayor Adams has finalized an executive order requiring all contracting oversight agencies to appoint a chief nonprofit officer. These officers will serve as the primary point of contact for nonprofits navigating city contracting and payment processes, ensuring a direct connection to agency leadership at City Hall. This executive order is a critical step in addressing the systemic misalignment that has long strained relationships between the city and its nonprofit partners. By implementing these policies, we are not only empowering nonprofits to advocate for their needs, but also fostering greater accountability within city government. The partnership between MOX and the Mayor's Office of Nonprofit Services is central to these reforms. By working in lockstep, our offices are adopting a unified approach to address these challenges that are facing the sector. Our immediate goal is clear: cut through bureaucracy and ensure providers get paid on time. But this work is about more than systems. It's about a commitment to honor the nonprofit sector's invaluable contributions and guarantee they have the resources needed to continue serving New Yorkers. Together, we launched multi-phase backlog initiatives focused on both aged invoices and unregistered contracts. Our human service agencies recently dispersed over $1.3 billion from 7,600 invoices at the end of last year through this initiative. and we are just winding down about an 8-week contract backlog sprint, focusing on submitting a portfolio of contracts to the controller. And so far, we've already submitted over $730 million worth of those contracts. To the providers who deliver critical services every day, we see you and we value you. We are committed to easing your burden. The reforms we've outlined are just the beginning, and we look forward to building on this momentum together. With smarter alignment, stronger collaboration, and ongoing innovation, we can ensure that New York City remains a place where those who serve others also can thrive. This work expands on the efforts that started with the Joint Task Force to get nonprofits paid on time, and laid the foundation for many of the city's reform efforts, with MOC's leading implementation for a number of recommendations. As you know, our progress began with the initial Clear the Backlog initiative, clearing over $6 billion in payments to not-for-profits, and MOC's doubled down on this progress by supporting agencies to achieve timely submission to the controller by July 1st. Our FY25 timeliness efforts led to the submission of 91% of those contracts for registration by the end of August, and for FY24, by September, we had 99% of those submitted for registration. And once again, we're already thick in working with our agencies to build on this work for FY26 through our all-hands-on-deck approach, increasing engagement, refining performance management efforts, and ensuring clear escalation pathways and accountability. Our mission to build trustworthy partnerships and minimize the potential for service disruption to our provider partners has remained at the front of mind, prompting many reforms to underlying policy and regulatory structure that will ensure the spirit of this work lives on to years to come. Some of the recent advancements include the passing of Local Law 85 of 2024, which amended the old Local Law 63 through a collaborative achievement with the city, the council, and labor that increased the threshold of proposed contracts requiring review from $200,000 to $1 million, also reduced the waiting period from 60 days to 10 days before an agency can proceed with contracting actions. The launch of challenge-based procurement, which represents an opportunity for us to shift the culture and paradigm of how we contract for innovative solutions. And public hearing reforms, as I mentioned earlier, is bringing not only shaving down from 20 days to 10 days, but moving us from an in-person to an online comment period. An increase of the Financial Control Board's threshold from $10 million to $50 million, also something that had not been touched since the 80s. And the expansion, among many other things in our MWBE space, and development of the first ever centralized mentorship program designed to offer support tools for minorities and small businesses and expand opportunities for growth. Alongside and in support of these successes, MOCS has diligently worked to keep pace with the rapid advancements being made in technology that allow us to build out the workflow to further these legislative milestones and automate processes. Improvements to our end-to-end procurement system, Passport, have required challenging but necessary actions to finally dismantle and modernize broken procurement system while providing a level of transparency and efficiency that is long overdue. In September 2024, MOCS rolled out its latest release, which included 2 new enhancements to our e-procurement platform, which deliver on key recommendations from the Joint Task Force to get nonprofits paid on time and the Rebuild, Renew, and Reinvent blueprint. The first of these enhancements is Passport Vault, which provides secure document storage and management, allowing seamless sharing with other Passport users and automatically linking documents to relevant business processes, which was a beloved function that existed in Accelerator. Users also gain access to subcontracting functionality in Passport, which finally brought the paper process of approving subcontractors into the digital age, while also augmenting accountability, now that these approvals are connected to contracts all the way through payment. And as a result, this new functionality has streamlined approval and payment actions while supporting MWBE utilization goals. As we were making important improvements to our groundbreaking e-procurement platform, MOCS took the necessary and responsible step of decommissioning our legacy system, HHX Accelerator, which had been dangerously left exposed for years. MOCS conducted the decommissioning and the migration through a planned phased approach over 5 months to allow sufficient time for each agency and the respective nonprofit provider community to get informed, trained, and acclimated. However, it can't be denied that what I call the great migration of HHX Accelerator has been massive change management effort that moved over 15,000 contracts and 30,000 budgets into Passport. It's important to acknowledge the challenges that come with adapting to new technology tools, and the impacts those actions have on our users remain a focus of our change management team. We weathered those choppy weathers, and with our core principles of ensuring broader access to New York City's procurement opportunities while increasing accountability and improving effectiveness as our North Star, we drove dramatic growth in our user base to over 13,000 while simultaneously adding new features and improving system functionality by 40% over the past 2 years. These enhancements made to Passport, coupled with the increase in users, has resulted in a 70% increase in our service desk submissions, impacting MOX's ability to provide timely responses and resolutions. I want to emphasize that the impacts and concerns expressed by our providers has not fallen on deaf ears. Your concerns are of the utmost priority of my office, and we are committed to reaching a state of complete stabilization and doing so with the highest level of transparency and accountability. So far in FY25, the city has dispersed over $3 billion in advances through Passport to help alleviate cash flow issues many of our human service providers are facing. And we will continue to engage with our partners and look forward to witnessing the benefits many users have already experienced with our modernization efforts. Beyond this work, and in partnership with the Office of MWBE and Department of Small Business Services, our team also supports the MWBE program. In FY24, the city awarded a record-breaking $6.4 billion in MWBE contracts and are continuing to make significant progress toward the administration's One NYC goal of awarding $25 billion in MWBE city contracts by FY26. Under Local Law 1, the city achieved its highest award total to MWBEs in history at approximately $1.6 billion, a 15% increase since the beginning of the administration. And our MWBE utilization rate also increased to 31.2%, marking one of the highest utilization rates the city has ever achieved since the program initiated in 2015. And our preliminary data for the first quarter of FY25 indicates we remain on a strong path with 32.7% utilization thus far. As I mentioned previously, our enhancements to the MWBE small business purchase method has been essential to our success, with major legislative increases from $500 to $1 million in FY23 and $1 million to $1.5 in FY24. This method showed a 60% increase in contract value from over $110 million in FY22 to $170 in FY23. And in FY24, the city awarded $248 million using this method. With the continued signs of progress and the implementation of other reforms mentioned today, I'm confident that we will continue to chip away at barriers to level the playing field and establish clear pathways for opportunity. In order to effectively implement change, we must understand that navigating the city's procurement process is not a solitary journey. The complexities of interpreting and implementing procurement policies to strategically leverage ever-evolving procurement tools necessitates a heightened commitment to increasing outreach and engagement efforts. Hence, our best-in-class learning and development team performed countless virtual and in-person training as part of our MOX Institute. They also published dozens of resources designed to meet vendors and agency staff where they are and address specific educational needs on demand. These efforts facilitated and improved users' ability to navigate enhancements made by Passport and to drive its adoption. And since launching in 2022, MOX Institute has trained over 22,000 users. This includes our MOX Procurement Training Institute, which is for agency users, which has trained over 10,000 users to date, and our MOX in Your Neighborhood, which is a monthly in-person workshop, and our Getting Started webinar series, in total, which have trained over 12,000 vendor users. MOX total budget for FY25 is $38.4 million, including $1.7 million for personnel services, $14.7 million for OTPS. The bulk of our budget is devoted to the Accenture and Evalua contracts, which maintain Passport and are valued at $9 million over 10 years for Evalua and nearly $4 million over 6 years for Accenture. Our current budgeted headcount is 181, with 34 vacancies currently open. As always, we will continue to work with OMB to determine appropriate levels of funding for the work outlined in my testimony, in addition to other critical existing and future efforts not mentioned here today. And in closing, I want to acknowledge that this final budget hearing marks a significant moment for MOX as we prepare for transition. We remain guided by our values of accountability, getting results, innovation, leadership, and equity. And I'm proud to say that we have not lost sight of these principles, and our accomplishments to date are a reflection of the outstanding support we've received from our providers, agency partners, and council. And we continue to break down barriers and challenge historical inequities. I want to acknowledge that there's still more work to be done, and we thank the committee for your partnership in supporting these initiatives so far and the commitment going forward, and are happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Director Flores. Okay, you covered a lot of ground in that testimony, but we're going to ask you a few questions to break it down and go into detail a little bit more. But before we start, I want to also acknowledge and thank you for your service in city government, from the Comptroller's Office to being the leader for Mayor's Office of Contract Services. So thank you so much. Our first question is for new needs and budget requests. We've made some progress since we both first began in 2022 for MOX's budget. And the council consistently advocates for MOX to get their funding it needs to process contracts in a timely manner, because we hear it so painfully from our nonprofit partners and the people that they service. And we will continue to support your office and MOX at large to getting the funding and headcount that it needs. So, however, to provide the support, we need to understand that your actual needs are what has been requested, approved, and what hasn't been approved. So our first question is, what would be the appropriate headcount and budget for MOX that would allow MOX to be at a place where all providers would receive their payments in a timely manner?
Thank you, Chair Wan, and yeah, it has absolutely been an honor to work with you over the years, and I appreciate both keeping us accountable, giving us great ideas, and really being a great partner. As you know, we talked about our current head count. I don't have a magical number here today. I will say that, as I mentioned in my testimony, the administration is extremely focused on our relationship with the nonprofit sector, our MWBEs, and there is a focus with City Hall on ensuring that we are looking at all possibilities to meet those needs, including OMB, in discussions about what are the appropriate needs of the office.
I want to acknowledge both Councilmember Botcher and Councilmember Brewer, who have joined us for this hearing. Have you made any requests for new needs to OMB that were not included in the preliminary plan, and if so, what were they?
We definitely are in conversations with the OMB and really looking to continue that partnership of what our ongoing needs are, and so we'll be continuing to work with them over the next few weeks and months of any additional changes needed to our budget. We definitely, as you know, in one of the last budget rounds, we did get some additional funding, and appreciate your advocacy there, and we'll continue to sort of work with OMB as we shift to where we are now with Passport, our current volume, and what our needs are going forward.
So is there anything specific for headcount or for capital needs for keeping Passport up to date?
We don't have any capital requests that are in, and definitely would look forward to coming back to you as we continue this conversation with the OMB about any other needs for the office.
What additional needs do you hope to see funded by the executive and adopted plans?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Chair One?
Do you have anything specific? Because we haven't heard any line items that you would like to see funded in the executive or adopted plan. Is there anything that you guys are gearing towards or have your eyes set on?
At this time, we're sort of working in partnership with OMB, again, looking at where we are now in terms of Passport and our current volume, and in active discussions with them.
In the last update you provided, MOX had 180 active positions. This means the position had 45 vacant budgeted positions. Is MOX still subject to the 2-to-1 hiring fees? And do you have to have approval from OMB to hire any vacant positions currently?
Thank you for the question, Chair Wanya. We are actively working with OMB to get our hires filled as quickly as possible. As you know, since we sort of all started in these positions post-COVID, I think we're all dealing with ensuring that we can both prevent attrition, but also really continue to show folks who are looking to work with government how amazing it is to work for government and get traction on hiring those staff as quickly as possible.
How many have you been able to hire in the last 3 years with the budget that you've had for the vacancies? How many vacancies have been filled in the last 3 years?
Thank you for that question, Chair Wan. I'm going to pass it off to my Chief Financial Officer and see if we have a number that's close to your question. The question is, how many vacancies have we hired for since the beginning?
Yeah,
of the administration?
externally.
I can say that we currently have 34 vacancies. And our previous year, we ended the year with 25 vacancies. And the year before, prior, we had 66 vacancies. So we're doing better in terms of the scale from the previous years. But yes, it's still something that we're all dealing with.
So are you still subject to the 2-to-1 hiring?
As I said, we're working with OMB where appropriate to move those PARs along as quickly as possible.
So I take that as yes, you are subject to the 2-to-1 hiring, and you have to get approval from OMB to fill the vacancy.
As you know, Chair Wan, the hiring process is quite complex, and so we have a great partnership with Director Jihan and his staff in ensuring that we're advocating for our needs and moving those as quickly as possible.
What is the average number of contracts being handled by each of your staff?
I'm sorry, Chair Wan. How many contracts per staff? Can you be more specific in our, obviously we have actions that come through our service desk, actions that come through our procurement operations. Can you be more specific on what number you're looking for?
Yeah, I think what our team is trying to understand is it goes back to how many more people do we need at MOX to help process these payments, since there are so many complaints of payment delays. And if we were to calculate it that way, I know that it's not an exact science, but on average, how many contracts do you think each person works on a monthly basis or a week-to-week basis that we can estimate for?
I appreciate that question. I'd have to get back to you, just to go back and say again, the way that we're organized, we have a procurement operations team, which oversees contract actions and takes actions on behalf of me as a CHIPO, in approving pre-solicitation reviews, requests for awards. Don't have that number off the top of my head. And then again, we also take in actions, whether it's on the legal side or our service desk. But I also want to just say, when we're talking about payments specifically, just to make the distinction as you know, but just for the record, that MOX is not reviewing or approving invoices or payments on behalf of agencies, right? We have a role, as per the charter, to make decisions on behalf of the mayor as it relates to procurement actions. We are not reviewing invoices or receiving invoices, are not part of the workflow from an approval standpoint for invoices.
So is it implied that we won't need more staff to help register these contracts and get them moving to get payments? Because everyone is asking us the same questions. How is it that their payments have gotten less and less or slower over a period of time? And I also want to acknowledge Councilmember Stevens for joining us.
Thank you for that question, Chair Wan. As I mentioned in my testimony, I think, it is a multifaceted sort of response, reasons, and by nature of that, solutions, which I mentioned earlier, that we are very focused in partnership with City Hall and Mons on multi-approach way of finding a solution. I will say this, I don't have that magic number here, but I will say, as I mentioned in my testimony, we are now at full adoption of Passport, right? And so that means that our full portfolio of both the construction, non-construction, and human services are all in one end-to-end system. And so it has to be noted that regardless of what technology system that you use, we are still in a change management process for both agencies and vendors to acclimate to doing their whole entire process in the system. As you know, and as those of you, including Councilmember Brewer and others who have been in these hearings before, when we were talking about invoicing and timelines even a few years ago, one of the major issues was that it was a black box, right? The amount of days it takes to pay an invoice based on the PBB rules is based on the IVR date, which is the invoice receive date. And there was no way to know what that date was. Someone received an invoice and a piece of paper in an envelope, and it went on your desk. And whenever the person decided to open that envelope and stamp it, that is when the date started, and that date didn't exist anywhere in the system. And so we are definitely still in a transition period of all acclimating to being all in one system and making sure the system works to the needs to streamline the process to go faster. But I also want to say, we are at the beginning of what is a major transition from a paper process into a full adoption of a technology solution when it comes to invoicing.
What is Mock's current attrition rate? Is there a specific position or area that has a higher turnover compared to the rest of the office? And if yes, what are the reasons for higher turnover in the position in the area? Do you believe that salary levels are competitive with the market?
Thank you, Chair Wan. I'm going to pass it off to Helga for some of those numbers you mentioned.
Mock's current attrition rate is 19%, and the highest areas are within our technology unit, which is just historically hard to fill because it's very competitive against the market. That's our highest. They represent 30% of our vacancies, a little over 30%.
So does your answer imply that our salary levels for those positions are not competitive with the market?
Chair Wan, I wouldn't necessarily say for the IT area that they're not competitive. We do spend a lot of time, obviously, reviewing those JVNs in comparison to other agencies and also the level of expertise for those positions when we're putting them out. I just think it has been always, for better or for worse, unfortunately, a challenge hiring in the IT area. And I think, obviously, that I think is similar in the private sector as well. People move through those positions usually quickly. They don't necessarily stay as long in some of the other positions. And so I don't think we're unique in continuing to have that challenge. But as I said earlier, you know, the mayor has made a commitment in really looking at all ways to expand our ability to hire folks and to meet folks who we may not necessarily engage with, including hiring halls and other ways with partnerships with colleges and others to increase the availability of folks who are applying to our jobs and get them through the process as quickly as possible. So we continue to double down on getting those folks filled.
I want to acknowledge Councilmember Sandy Nurse has also joined us. When it comes to new needs and budget requests on headcount or recruitment or attrition, what would you say that Mock's biggest challenges are for the next year, and how do you foresee that they can overcome those challenges?
Thank you for that question, Chair Wan. I think, you know, we really want to focus on, when it comes to our technology, in stabilization. As I mentioned earlier, you know, we increased the volume of activity by 40%, you know, just in less than a year, and added about 13 to 15,000 users, and that continues to grow. We have over 130,000 users in Passport, and the complexity and the amount of workflows that exist in our system are probably not comparable to any municipality in the United States. So I think really making sure that we're doubling down on stability of the system, continuing to look at our current workflows and make adjustments where necessary. For example, one of the things that we recently did, and again, thank you to your advocacy, Councilmember Stevens and others, the last round where we did receive some additional new needs last year, we took a look at some of the pain points that we could address quickly in the system, and one of those was doing the budget process in Passport. In comparison, just for a moment, if I may, in Accelerator, for the nonprofit contracts and human service providers, you were able to begin your budget process in January or February. So it gave you more time to engage with your provider, finalize that budget, and have it ready to go once pre-processing opens in May, so that you were not so compressed in your already compressed timeline. We just rolled out this February, we made changes to Passport to create a budget readiness process to allow that similar process. Last year, agencies were unable to do that process with their vendors until May. So that really compressed the timeline for folks to get their contracts over the finish line. And so those kinds of changes that may seem small but are extremely impactful for the efficiency and ability for agencies with their resources to have plenty of runway to get work done and meet the appropriate timelines.
What is now the annual cost of the Passport system since it's fully online?
Thank you for that question. I'll hand it over to my CFO in a moment, but I will say that, you know, we've taken a look at some of the costs, not only for our system, but in comparison to other systems, and I will say that, you know, back of the envelope, for the amount of workflows and activity that exists in our system, again, looking at Chicago, looking at San Francisco, we have an immense amount of activity and processes that do not exist in some of those systems. And comparatively, our annual costs are lower than some of those other systems. And obviously, we have cyclical costs depending on if we're doing a rollout. And as I mentioned, we did release 6 last year, so there was a temporary increase in the cost. But I'll hand it over to Helga to give you more specifics.
Our current annual costs are between $10 to $11 million. That's just maintenance and system and just the platform. When you include the rollout, it's between 13 to 14 million over the 11 years.
You said $13 million over 11 years?
Annually over 11 years, including all enhancements.
Okay. And are you still working with the same contractor hired to maintain the passport system? It was Accenture, I believe, before?
Yep, we are still working with both Ivalua and Accenture.
And how much are you paying for each contractor?
Do we have that information?
Accenture, we pay on average $7 million a year, and Ivalua, just for the platform, is $2 million a year. Again, these are just current rates that we've negotiated with them.
Okay. And it sounds like it's safe to say that the phased update the passport is in, it's now at the completion? Since we first began 3 years ago, or is there still more to come?
Well, I mean, I would say just to step back, as you may know, Chair Wan, the original scope of this contract when it was let some years ago, over 10 years ago, was to pilot 4 agencies and do about 2 releases, maybe 3. Obviously, release 1 being Vendex, and all the way through COVID, where they did release 3, which was sourcing. So invoicing, for example, was not in the original scope. I say that because we obviously have a much more complex system that was originally envisioned. And so as I mentioned earlier, at this time, we don't have a planned major release, and definitely want to focus on looking at our current processes where we can make changes to ensure that the processes are as efficient as possible to streamline and continue to speed up the process. But there's definitely an opportunity for us to continue to add on to the system as we work with our agencies to prioritize what they'd like to see in the system. As any system, it does not include every single thing every single agency wants, and sometimes that's a good thing, right? We want some standardization across the system, where we constantly engage with both our users and our agencies to see where we can prioritize changes in the future.
For Passport, are there recommendations from Evalua or Accenture or whoever does the quality assurance now for maintenance as well as upgrades to make it up to date? Because as we've seen since the first year that we've been in office or have had this position till now, the user experience hasn't changed a great deal for it to be a very user-friendly platform.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, and I do remember, I think our first meeting, Chair Wan, and you came over and looking at from your background in technology, it doesn't necessarily have the look and feel that folks are necessarily accustomed to. But I would say again, even with our city's financial management system, ultimately you want both a user experience and stabilization, and that the system works. And I'm very proud of the fact that we have done some major releases, major changes in increasing the volume, and we have still areas of improvement, but that the system is working. But we definitely every single day, not only with our contractors, but I can't emphasize enough that we, through our change management team, have change management officers at each agency which we engage with, and we're constantly looking at ways that we can update the system again in a way that more accurately reflects the most streamlined process as possible. And always look forward, and as you know, any recommendations folks have, we really take those seriously and look at what would potentially have the greatest impact across the system to the greatest number of users.
The November plan included $500,000 in fiscal year 25, increasing to $1 million in fiscal year 26 for the out years for the passport quality assurance. How much of this funding goes to quality assurance, and how much of it is actually fixing bugs in the system, and what improvements have you seen in the passport system since the addition of this funding, and who is doing the quality assurance now? We want to make sure that it's not the same vendor who's also doing the maintenance.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wan. And again, I appreciate the commitment in ensuring that we receive additional funds. I definitely have to get back to you with some of the detail of your questions, but I would say that, we have, as I mentioned earlier, the budget readiness is one of the changes that we made. We've made some additional changes and more that are in the hopper related to sort of decoupling certain activities that were built in Passport related to invoicing to allow for more streamlined payment. So I'll give you one example. Advances, as you know, are nonprofit providers and human service providers are eligible for an automatic advance of 25% at the beginning of the fiscal year. Previously, as we fully adopted all of those contracts from Accelerator into Passport, there was a sort of checks and balances built into the system that would not allow advances to go forward automatically if there was another pending action related to that contract. We removed that in order to ensure that we have more seamless flow of funds to vendors. So definitely can share with you after this. There's been a bunch of these sort of what, again, I would say may seem like little changes externally, but altogether are towards this end of really having, especially the invoicing and budgeting process, be more streamlined than it is now.
And who is the quality assurance provider now?
We're still working through bringing that vendor on and can definitely give you updates.
Okay. Are there any other capital costs for updating Passport that, I know that right now there's nothing definitive, but is there anything that you have in mind or a project ID that we can try to support?
At this time, we don't have any capital funding or pending requests for capital funding.
And what effect has Passport Vault or Document Vault had on processing contracts? And what has been the feedback from the users?
Thank you for that question. So Passport Vault, as you know, was one of the recommendations in the Get Nonprofits Paid on Time, the joint report that was issued with both the controller and the mayor at the beginning of his administration. And both agencies and vendors, when I walked in the door, that was at the top of their wish list to recreate what was a beloved function and accelerator that did not exist in Passport. So that essentially what was not in Passport previously was that was an accelerator, is that if you were a provider and you were giving, let's say, X document across 5 different agencies or 5 different contracts, in Accelerator, you were able to choose who to share that with so they weren't constantly sharing the same document over and over again. So essentially, the main function of Passport Vault was to recreate that ability for a vendor to share documents across their relationships with the City of New York. I would say that so far, I think it's still a change management issue in terms of both agencies and providers sort of re-engineering how they manage their documents in order to fully take advantage of the functionality of Passport Vault. But I think we're in the right direction of folks getting acclimated and how they're doing their work a little bit differently in order to have those documents all available and shared with all of their contracting agencies.
So, to my understanding, it is fully functional, and some folks are using it and some folks haven't picked it up yet.
Yeah, all of the agencies and vendors are using it. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's still, not to completely bore you more than I already probably had with all of these details, but just as an example, when you set up your contract, it's basically, if you were to set up on your computer all of your files, you need to do some work ahead of time of how you're organizing your files in order to then completely take advantage of how you're sharing those across the system. And so agencies are still acclimating to doing that fully, but we have conducted, I think the first training that we did for Passport Vault after release, we had 900 people on that call, right? And we are weekly, daily, not only providing webinars and in-person training, because it's not just acclimating to the system functionality, it is acclimating to best practices and how you manage your files, and we continue to offer those trainings to our providers and to our agencies.
Are there any costs related to Passport Vault for planned upgrades? Because from what the feedback that we hear from our providers or from nonprofits is that if we were to utilize existing AI technology to build it into Passport to organize, filter, and tag these documents, to have the AI actually skimming through and doing it for you, then it may save everybody a lot more time if they just bulk uploaded all their documents.
Chair Wan, I would love to talk to you about all the things that AI can do in procurement. As my staff knows, I have a very robust wish list if the world's a perfect place and there are rainbows and butterflies, and using AI appropriately and responsibly across the whole procurement system. In terms of where we are now with the system functionality, as you may know, we have tried wherever possible in appropriate and responsible way to leverage additional software as part of our procurement end-to-end solution. And so the Passport Vault, the documents are part of a contract we have with LifeRay, and there's a small increase to the LifeRay contract, which I'm happy to share with you, but it's very minimal to the overall cost of the system.
Okay, I would definitely be happy to talk offline. And then contract stat. What is the current status of contract stat? And from what I understand, internally agencies have access, but there are others who are also asking for access to it. So that's what's causing the question of whether it's delayed or not. Could you clarify?
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Chair Wan. So first, I will say that, and I think you and I have had this conversation before, but restate that I am 100%, as you are, committed to ensuring that we have reporting functionality, both for agencies, our users, and externally, as you know, that we add a huge amount of data externally in this administration through Passport that was not available previously. We have also issued, since the last releases that we've done and the accelerator decommissioning, have created a number of reports, primarily in our financials area, so that we can allow agencies to have appropriate tools for performance management. And specifically in contract stat, as you know, we did roll out an internal version of contract stat on the city side. We're actually really excited, and definitely will defer to Executive Director Michael Cedillo. Really excited to be working with Mons on kind of restating or reinstituting that practice, not just the data, but the practice of looking at data and holding our agencies accountable. And it's they're making great progress, and it's a priority of the administration. But I definitely would defer some of those details to Executive Director Cedillo going forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna turn it over to my colleagues for some questions as well, because they've been patiently waiting. Councilmember Bottcher.
Thank you very much. How are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you.
Good, thanks. I really appreciate all your efforts to improve the contracting process for nonprofits and the payment timeline for nonprofits. And I also understand that you inherited many of the issues that you're trying to fix. The district I represent, Council District 3, we probably have more nonprofits than anywhere in the city. They're headquartered in our district. With all these reforms happening that you outlined today, when can the nonprofits in my district expect to see improvement? They haven't yet. They're still struggling with getting paid, sometimes for years. Will they see things get better next year?
Thank you for that question. You know, I know that it seems and feels as if there's no way out of this, but I promise you that, again, and I appreciate you sort of saying, Council Member, a lot of how we got here is, you know, built up over many years, and not even to suggest blaming any specific person or administration, but processes. You know, there's the rules and regulations which have built up over many years, but there's also just processes that have built up over many years. I can tell you that I truly believe you will continue to see some rays of light both this year, through the end of this year, and soon after. We have started really in earnest, not only with our technology, as I mentioned in my testimony, we've changed rules that haven't been touched since the 80s, and that takes time, and it also takes sort of really dedication to see that impact. And I know I've had conversations with multiple folks here around ensuring that what we're doing has permanent impact going forward. I do think that also making changes to the discretionary process, which we continue to work with council, especially I'm sure in your district, there are a lot of city council discretionary awards. As you know, we just instituted the multi-year discretionary process. Our preliminary results show a 6 to 9 month decrease in the timeline. And so I think we will start to see more of that impact starting next year. And definitely looking forward to conversations of even thinking bolder around how we can do discretionary contracts. So all that being said, definitely I hope that you will continue to see some improvements and cash out the door. We've been doing, as I mentioned in my testimony, a short-term backlog initiative on invoices, making changes to Passport to ensure that payments can go smoother. And there is a weekly meeting with Deputy Mayor Amazar, First Deputy Mayor, OMB, and others, looking at all of the short, medium, and long-term things that need to continue moving forward to ensure a timely payment to our nonprofit sector.
Thank you. I want to follow up on Chair Wan's questions about artificial intelligence and the use of AI. It seems to me that procurement is an area where AI would have a lot of potential to help cut down on these processing times and make it easier for everybody. You had said earlier that you had a wish list of ways that AI could be applied. Have you been able to execute AI and implement it where you've wanted to? And are there areas where you've struggled to get it implemented? How can we expect to see it used in a specific way? And are there any barriers in place that you're facing?
No, I appreciate that question, Council Member. So first and foremost, as you know, the administration has an AI plan. And definitely, as I'm sure you know, and those who are familiar with technology, this is a question that every municipality and also private sector folks are dealing with, right? It is the sort of interest du jour. Everyone's talking about AI, but it's important, especially as a municipality, that we do that in a responsible way, both to protect the city, any risk that we may have, but also do that in a way that has the intended impact of increasing efficiency. So we definitely sort of internally have had some conversations at MOX around testing it in sort of low-risk environments. For example, in service desk is one that we're interested in. But obviously, the sky's the limit long-term in order to use it, whether it's for creating a first draft of a contract, creating a first draft of evaluation processes. There's a lot of opportunity there. I think what's important, though, in my opinion, is that we're laying the groundwork and planning, but not trying to lay over right at this very moment when we're trying to get folks paid, sort of shiny new things that are important, but that we should be working on in parallel to when we are in a better place, as you mentioned earlier, of getting paid faster, having a more efficient system, and then utilizing technology on top of that. So definitely on our wish list, but as I mentioned to Chair Wan, I want to double down on ensuring that the current state works as it's intended before we start layering on new and shiny things that I'm excited about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bottcher. Next, Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you very much. We know how great you are and how your staff is. One question that I get along the same lines, because we're just looking at the big picture, is the interest they have to pay because they're not getting paid. And of course, then the Washington situation hovers. Do you have a sense of, I mean, one organization is paying $28,000 a month for interest. That's not, you can't recoup that. So it almost takes your breath away. We all want to help. We all want this, you do, but I'm sorry, thank you. Is there something, are you aware of some total amount that people are paying in terms of interest? Do you know which organizations are paying interest? And is it the agencies, like you said, you're not responsible for, I would say, crossing the Ts and dotting the Is. That's the ACOs, I assume, and the agencies. But are some agencies, I'm sure you can't list them here, are screwing up? I mean, we all just can't really believe. I think you're caught up a lot maybe in some of the backlog, as you suggest. But then you get a new backlog. So I don't know. I just want to get a sense, maybe first about the interest rates, and then second, what else we can do, I guess dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but not make it so that every dot and every T has to be crossed. I don't know. I know it's public money, but my God. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, council member. So we do have a number on how much interest payments were made by the city, but to your point, obviously anecdotally, what I hear from providers, both on their interest payments, on their ability to access lines of credit, it's difficult. I will say that, as you may know, we really doubled down on our RGF, our returnable grant program. We streamlined the process early last year, and we expanded eligibility exponentially. And that is available to nonprofit providers. I would say to your question regarding sort of, the crossing the T's and dotting the I's, I agree with you 100%. I think we as administration have been looking at ways that we can really direct agencies and give them not just the guardrails, but also the direction on how to be reviewing some of these actions, including invoices, that both continue to protect the city's fisc, which obviously is the utmost responsibility of all of us, but also clearing the pathway. So, for example, earlier, about 2 months ago, I believe, we issued a directive from my office to agencies related to invoice payment processes, and directed agencies and doubled down on some of the best practices they should be following. So, for example, sort of doing a more limited review of certain documentation post payment of the invoice. Also directing agencies to do partial payments. So, as I'm sure you've heard, you've got 30 lines on an invoice. If you have a disagreement with one of them, you don't need to hold up the whole invoice, pay the 29 lines. And so we're really looking at that level of detail now. I will say that now is the first time we have visibility into all of this, because this whole invoicing process is in Passport, and we are constantly being flexible on where do we need to issue directives, where do we need process changes, where do we need to ensure policies and procedures actually both get people paid on time and protect the city's fisc.
Okay, and then same problem, maybe only anecdotal, but the larger agencies, even Gale, that only got 10 weeks left of, and that sounds like a lot, but it's not, a payroll. And I got $30 million, this is an example, that the city owes me. I don't even know what to say to that. Now, that might be, we didn't, and they claim often that it's because of the slowness of, as I call it, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So I guess I don't know, Madam Chair, whether it's maybe you have to haul in all the ACOs and something, because, I know there's maybe when there's turnover, in the ACO world, then you can't keep up with doing all the training. But there's something. It's so deep, and now, of course, with the federal concerns, people really panic. Maybe 10 weeks of payroll becomes 5 weeks of payroll. Yep. And then you're really in deep trouble.
Yeah, Councilman.
I don't know. I'm almost afraid to walk down the street. I may not have as many nonprofits as you, but I got a lot. Go ahead.
I would say, as you know, Councilmember, I am always an open door, open book for any nonprofit or anyone who wants to call and discuss these things with me and try to get things fixed.
I understand.
I would say that it is the number of individuals to finish a process is not limited to the ACOs, right? And that's part of what we're doing in earnest at the direction of City Hall and in partnership with MONS and OMB, is really starting now, even in more detail than we have in the past, each step of the process and who are the individuals who are doing this process in a way that we can, again, where we can streamline and make the pathway smoother, that's our job to do as oversights, but also provide them with the tools to do that, whether it's training, whether it's directives. and it is all hands on deck.
Yes.
If they're non-for-profits, and I know this is not necessarily soothing to say, but if there are non-for-profits that are reaching out to you, we are 100% available in partnership with Mons and OMB and the agencies to hunt down whatever we can hunt down and unlock those funds.
I could give everybody your cell number, but I don't think I want to do that.
Most of those people have it, so I'm happy to share it with you.
But I'm just saying, as you know, the answer is not to call you or me. The answer is to try to fix it.
Absolutely.
So you're saying by the end of the year or beginning of next year, people will find a difference. Now, that means that you'll do that, but that doesn't mean the agencies are going to be up to speed. I'm just saying, that's a problem, too.
I will say, and you know this, council member, the agencies are working so hard, and I really have to give credit to the agencies who are, since COVID, have been just nonstop meeting the needs of the city of New York, and as they should, but they are committed to doing this work.
I know that.
I would say that the coordinated effort that and the re-engagement and energy of the coordinated effort with Michael Cedillo at OMB and City Hall, I hope you're going to continue to see positive changes.
The only other thing I'll stop is Fund for the City of New York. I assume you're in touch with them because they're the ones doing some of these bridge loans.
Yes.
Obviously, there are other places too. They're frustrated beyond belief. So I don't know, maybe having a conversation with them in addition, because they too are getting massive complaints, or anybody else who's doing these bridge loans, to have like a bridge loan meeting or something, so that you can see, because anybody who's taking out these loans is not getting their money, and they're owed money, otherwise they wouldn't get the bridge loan.
Yeah, we have a great partnership with Funds for the City of New York, as you know. It goes back many years, and in addition to running the RGF program out of our office, that coordination and partnership is also informing the other programs that they have and informing us on how we're making decisions on loans. But there's no lack of collaboration and open, honest communication around where we need to do better. And I commit to you, and as I said at the beginning of this hearing, the staff at MOX is 1,000% committed to this work, and this work will continue.
Box is fine, that's not the problem, as you know. I'm going to say it. So you got a lot of agencies, I know the bad ones, I'm not going to mention them here, because we get the calls. Yes, you know which ones they are. So the question is, those are some of the ones that I've got these massive cash flow problems, plus these massive interest payments every month. So I don't know, it's got to get fixed. I know you're working on it, I'll keep quiet, but it's still, it's not hanging like it should, if I may say. Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you, Chair Brewer. Next, we have Councilmember Stevens.
Well, hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Councilmember?
I'm gonna be nice to you today.
Thank you. You're always nice.
I know. But this is one of the issues that I'm really passionate about, and just understanding how it really just affects the infrastructure of the city. And I will say that you have always been super responsive, have made every effort to do everything in your power, but still that's not enough, right? And I think Councilmember Brewer was just kind of like harping on that, right? One, we should not have to call you in order to fix clogs in the system or, continue to badger those things. It is clear issues in the system that we need to reform, and my issue is just like, why are we just not doing it? I remember when the backlog was cleared 2 years ago, and we were all out there. Everybody was like, the backlog is clear, and then now here we are. And so again, that means whatever is being done is not working. So I think for me, that's often just my frustration of like, how do we fix it for real and not for a press conference or to say that we did something. We don't need a task force. We need true policy change. But one of my questions is, I know, we've been talking about like more money's been going out the door. And then even here in your testimony, you talked about the multi-year discretionary contracting reform and how that's been helpful. But people have not seen our discretionary money that we've been putting out because the system is so backed up from the contracts. So can you talk a little about that? Because that has been one of the things, right? Like, we give these organizations money, they're excited, we're like, yay, we're doing press conferences, but they don't see the money for years. And I'm talking about specifically the discretionary money. And I know this whole idea around having it being a multi-year contract was going to make it so much better, which I didn't agree with. But everyone said it would help. And then even hearing your testimony, you speak about how they're getting their money a year earlier. When I speak to providers, they haven't seen our discretionary money in about 2 years.
Thank you, Councilmember. So starting with the discretionary questions, so we started the multi-year discretionary, I believe, in FY24, and so as you know, then if there are providers who had discretionary contracts prior to the allocation of FY24, they weren't going to be wrapped up in the new multi-year discretionary process. So I'm sure that there are providers who had contracts before that, who may be still not seeing the benefit of the multi-year discretionary contracts. I will say for the multi-year discretionary contracts, again, was not intended to be the silver bullet. As you know, in collaboration with council, we had a number of recommendations, and that was the one that we could all agree on.
We all didn't agree on it.
As you know, there's always a menu of options, and happy to talk about the other items on the menu that didn't make it to the table. But we were able, as you know, taking responsibility at MOX and making sure that we were loading up those multi-year discretionaries to streamline and get this whole process started. And as I said, we've seen preliminarily 6 to 9 months shaved off of that process. I do think you'll see this year, hopefully, another big bump in really showing the benefit of the multi-year discretionary contracts. But there are other options on the table that
we'll see a big benefit. Can you, like, how many more? Like, do you have a percentage? Do you have data to back that up and not just like anecdotal? Because I'm telling you, I'm hearing from the providers, they're not seeing it. So even, can you talk a little about like what that bump looks like now? Because what I'm hearing is they have not seen this discretionary money.
Absolutely. I may not have it on me, but I'll definitely, if I do, by the end, I'll give it to you. If not, I'll follow up. But we do have data tracking the multi-year discretionary process. And again, I think that we expected that the first year you weren't necessarily going to see the biggest bump in the processing time in terms of reducing the processing time. But once you got that initial contract registered, that by FY25 and next year, you already have a contract registered, so you should see a drastic reduction in the amount of time for you to be able to access the allocated funds. Definitely, and again, we'll talk about this all day long, as you know, Council Member. There's a lot to be done that we can continue to improve on the process of the front end of the allocation, developing the scope, and really streamlining that process so that it takes less time for the agency to sort of get the baton from the council members in order to create the scope for those contracts. And to your first question, I agree with you 100%. I think, as I mentioned earlier, and we knew a little bit of this coming in, that some of what we're trying to dismantle or improve and have permanent impact, as I mentioned in the testimony, which is just some of the items, these are things that no one's touched for decades, right? And so, which is why I said earlier, I think with the momentum of some of this hard work of rolling up your sleeves and doing something that folks really didn't want to tackle before, that this will start to come together and we'll continue to see improvements. But I completely understand that all of you and us are hearing from the sector.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems like it's a very slow drip, but the reality is it shouldn't be, right? Like, if people are doing a service, they should get paid for it. And, like, it's just really just that simple. And then, especially when they're at other entities, they see, like, when they get, money from other government entities that are not the state, whether it's federal or state, it's not taking as long for them to get the money and get access to the money, because it shouldn't take 2 or 3 years. And again, like I said, I am very aware that you're doing everything in your power to get this stuff done, but clearly it is not your office. There's clearly other things that we need to be looking at to reform, because honestly, this cannot continue to happen, and it's really just not fair. And, I know a big responsibility of this work is yours, but there's other people, like my council member colleague was just saying, that we should be holding accountable, because we know that we have some agencies where they'll get the money out faster, like, one of my agencies, ACS. I hear all the time that they're much easier to get their things paid for and get the money out than others. And so if some agencies can do it, then it's then reflective of like why are we not using that as a model for the other ones? But we'll continue to talk, and thank you.
And if I may, Chair, just to say that, if I have a moment, that part of the issue with invoicing and payment, it's not the only issue, but Councilmember is, as I mentioned earlier, lack of standardization across all of the agencies and the processes. And now that we have the process in full adoption in Passport, part of the funding that we received in creating sort of this payment task force within MOX, and that we're actively hiring up for that full team, is to be able to dig in and see what are those processes across all the agencies so that we can create standard processes and you can have the same expected experience with each agency and hold them accountable to that.
Thank you so much, Chair, Councilmember Stevens. For Passport full adoption, does that mean that we now have DOE and H&H on it as well? Because we have the highest amount of complaints about DOE outstanding contracts as well.
Chair, I didn't hear the first part of your question. Can you repeat that?
For Passport full adoption,
Yeah.
were we successful in getting our friends at DOE to adopt Passport?
So Passport is full adoption for all the mayoral agencies. There are some contracts from DOE in the system, but a small portfolio. Obviously, as you know, New York City Public Schools is not under the jurisdiction, under the charter of MOX, and is obviously governed by New York State education law, and their procurement rules are also governed, obviously, from those laws, and they have their own systems.
So do you think that if we made the charter revision, I know that a lot of folks are testifying at the charter revision hearings right now, is that something that the New York City charter revision could do, or is that going to take state law to require New York City Public Schools to participate in Passport?
Well, Chair Wan, not being a lawyer and definitely on the fly at a council hearing, I would not give you my unofficial
Okay.
legal opinion, but
Yeah, I will have to look this up because...
happy to nerd out with you later on charter New York State education law.
Okay, because we have to figure out how to get them in Passport fully. And then regarding, following up on Councilmember Stevens' question, in January, the mayor issued an executive order requiring city agencies to designate a chief nonprofit officer to improve services and expedited payment to providers. Have all agencies designated a chief nonprofit officer? Is this a standalone position or an additional responsibility to an existing role?
Thank you for that question, Chair Wan. Yes, the Executive Order 47 that was issued at the beginning of the calendar year and corresponding with the naming of Executive Director Cedillo in that position really doubles down on our commitment to having a centralized and focused individual and sort of communication process with our agencies focusing on the nonprofit experience. And so among many of the other things that the CNO is responsible for is sort of being an abuds person at that agency to not only engage with the sector, but also engage with my office, MONS, and other oversights as we're trying to streamline processes, but also communicate in a way that is extremely efficient, and not only to solve problems, but also as we're communicating on these continued work on solutions going forward. I definitely will defer to Executive Director Cedillo on sort of the state of the full list of all of those CNOs that have been named, but I know there are a number of agencies that have already named CNOs, and there's active meetings and communication happening at the direction of Executive Director Cedillo at MONS.
Okay, are the positions or the names of the people who have these positions public? Because you know how usually we have the chief procurement officer for agencies public? Are these public?
Chair Wan, I'd have to get back to you after, or have Executive Director Cedillo get back to you in the answer to that question. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, because I think I really support this executive order, and I want to figure out how, because I have a next set of questions about assistance, because people ask all the time, who do I call for help? And I think if we are able to have a public figure, whether it's a CPO or a CNO, that we can have as a directory for nonprofits to reach out to say, hey, I have this outstanding payment from MOCJ, here's who I can talk to, and making that easier for these folks, although that will be a high volume for these one individuals, but at least there's somebody we can name. And can you help us also understand how, I'm still trying to understand how MOX works with MONS and what the reporting structure is like now. I know that they have 6 staff members.
Thank you for the question, Chairwoman. I'll definitely start and then defer to Helga on the specific numbers about budget and staff. Mons works very closely with MOX. We are, I would say, partners in the trenches together, and it's not, as I said, our goal collectively is not only to solve the incoming, which is important and a priority, but also to continue to work full steam ahead on the future state and ensuring that we're continuing to be flexible and creative and timely around doing procurement changes, process changes, and technology changes. And so we work in partnership on those weekly meetings with City Hall. We work in partnership and incoming from non-for-profits. We work in partnership in developing sort of joint initiatives in changing rules and regulations. And so all I can say is that we are hand in hand on all that we're doing related to the nonprofit sector.
And I feel like everyone has asked this question now. Every single person has asked the question. But again, the public wants to know what further steps can we take to improve collaboration and get providers paid on time through this new mayoral executive order, MONS, the CPOs, the CNOs, and MOX.
Chair, I want to first say that my CFO was just saying that the names of the CNOs are public, so definitely.
And is there contact information online as well, like that we do for CPOs?
It seems like there may be, but we can definitely confirm.
Okay, great for them. That's very brave. Takes a lot of courage to do that.
And I'm sorry, can you repeat your question one more time, Chair Wan? I apologize.
It's just what steps can be taken to improve collaboration to get providers paid on time? And the public is also wondering, have you seen improvements over the last 2 months in interagency collaboration since the executive order has taken place?
Absolutely. Executive Director Cedillo, with his experience in government, as you may know, he also used to work at MOX years ago. And has worked on a number of initiatives in his previous roles during this administration related to nonprofit sector. So I think 1,000%, it's been an immediate, improvement and increase of collaboration from where we already had collaboration with our agency, City Hall, and our umbrella groups, and directly with the nonprofit sector.
A lot of groups have reached out for assistance, so a lot of nonprofits have reached out for assistance with passport systems, and they describe typically they face an average of 15 to 20 business days of delay until they receive a response from the help desk. So is the help desk only for organizations seeking assistance? What is the current backlog of help desk requests? And approximately how many requests are submitted per month, and how many staff do you have working on these requests?
Thank you for the question, Chair Wan. So we do have a current backlog. I would say that our service desk, we hold ourselves to a standard of white glove service, which takes questions both from providers, any contractors either doing business or interested in doing business with the city, and our agency users. We are, as you mentioned correctly, at a current backlog of over 10 to 15 days, in some cases, of responding to a ticket. Our goal, which we have met before, is 2 days, and we are working, staff is working weekends, nights, and really trying to get through that backlog. I think part of, as I mentioned in my testimony, I can give you some of the numbers in a moment of specifics in terms of tickets. Some of the reasons why we have a backlog is, as I mentioned earlier, we have a huge increase in the number of users and activities since we decommissioned Accelerator and brought all of that activity into Passport. And so with the user base increasing, the activities increasing, and our recent releases that were major releases for Passport Vault and subcontracting module, we have what traditionally after a release you see an uptick for a short period of time in tickets and then it stabilizes. We haven't yet been able to get to that stabilization point, but we have been taking steps internally to change some of our processes to hope see an improvement. As I said, staff working around the clock and working closely with OMB on sort of what our needs are to handle the new volume.
So how many staff members are there dedicated to working on the help desk requests?
I believe at this time, and Helga will correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we have 18 budgeted. Is that correct? 18 budgeted.
18 budgeted with no overtime for weekends and evenings. And are these 18 budgeted headcount employees? This is their standalone job. This is their main position.
Yes.
Are there any non-standalone positions who are also pitching in to answer the high volume of requests?
So we have, I will say this, responding to a ticket, determining the solution to the ticket is a little bit of all hands on deck. And just to take you, like, the journey of a ticket, right? The ticket comes in to a service desk person. That person is doing like a call center, a triage, and trying to determine, is this actually a system issue or is this a user issue? And then responding appropriately. If it's a user issue where they just pushed the wrong button and you could fix it, responding it that way. If it's a technology issue that requires a fix, then that is going to go to other folks in our staff who are not in the service desk to help solution the fix. So it might be our IT team, it might be in collaboration with our finance team or our procurement operations team. But the folks who actually are the incoming for tickets, that is their only job.
And are all your 18 positions currently filled?
No, we currently have vacancies.
How many vacancies do you have?
4.
So you have 14 people working on service desk. And are these 4 vacancies subject to the 2-to-1 hiring freeze?
We are working with OMB to streamline and get these folks hired as quickly as possible. We've been working very closely in partnership with OMB on these particular positions.
And what is the average salary of this position? I'm going to need a job soon.
I don't know that I have that in front of me, Chair Wan, but I can
Okay.
definitely get back to you with that afterwards as a follow-up.
Okay, so we'll follow up. And is there some sort of synthesis or analysis being done of the incoming tickets so that we can have an analysis of frequently asked questions or self-service for a lot of the issues that come up?
Absolutely. So there's a few ways that we've been doing that, and then some changes that we're going to be making, I think, this month to improve that process. So we do kind of categorize those tickets, and again, after a release, we work really closely internally and with our contractors to determine whether or not it's a user issue or root cause as a result of the release. And so we've categorized those around sort of new functionality or potential user issues. We are also working, and we have been working really closely, whether it's a new release or analyzing our tickets with our change management team and our learning development team, so that we are actively sort of taking that information and either adding additional classes or tweaking our learning development tools to specifically address some of those needs that may just be user entry, that they need additional information. As you know, we have something called our contracting roadmap, where we do our monthly webinars, and we make those available on YouTube so that even if you went to the training and you need to go back and pause the video to figure out how to do that step again, we push that information out consistently. We are instituting new intake forms and processes, I believe this month, in order to sort of further categorize the buckets of those tickets so that we can continue to make those efforts on how we can have interventions to decrease the number of tickets coming in.
Okay. For the MOX fiscal year 26 preliminary OTPS budget, it's approximately $500,000, so $500,000 less than fiscal year 25 adopted OTPS budget. What is the reason for this difference, and what OTPS costs aren't funded in fiscal year 26 that are included in fiscal year 25? Is there any underspending as well in the current year?
Thank you, Chair Wan. I believe, but I'll pass it off to Helga, is that some of those are the sort of quote-unquote prorated for the fiscal year and then baselined in the out years, but I'll refer to Helga.
Yeah, so there's a chunk of initiatives that you mentioned earlier that were prorated this year that are increasing next year. And then there are additional one-time funding that drops off in next year. So we had the passport capital enhancement, which was $500K, which was only a one-time amount that drops off next year. And then we also have increases every year for the GWI, or the increases for managerial. So it's a net, and the net, I would say that one of the biggest factors is that one-time fee for the passport capital enhancement.
Got it. And is there any underspending forecast for this current fiscal year?
Underspending? Absolutely not.
Okay. Good to hear. Even with the vacancies? Gotcha. So we can forecast potentially underspending for OTPS because of the vacancies, if we're not able to fill them.
You mean PS? Underspending in PS?
Yeah.
We're actively working to fill our vacancies.
Okay. And if I understand, within the last 3 fiscal years, have we been able to fill vacancies or? Okay. And I also have a follow-up question. Well, let me have you finish that question first. For personnel or for vacancies, within the last 3 fiscal years, have you been able to fill all the vacancies that you had budgeted for, or were they underspent year to year?
Chairwoman, I think, again, we would not be unique as an agency in saying that we haven't been at 100% budgeted and actual when it comes to our personnel. But definitely, CFO Nayanfar can go over those numbers again in terms of what our vacancy rates were for each fiscal year. But we make concerted efforts to really shake the trees and focus across the office with our hiring managers to prioritize and streamline and get folks in seats as soon as possible.
Okay. What is the title of the position for personnel working on the help desk for passport assistance?
Do you have the title? We'll take a look, Chairwoman, and if we have the answer before the end, we'll provide it to you.
Okay. I'm gonna move on to council discretionary contract questions. By total dollar value, discretionary contracts make up a very small portion of the city's contract budget, but the number of contract generated from the provision of discretionary funding makes up a much larger portion of the total number of city contracts. What are the challenges faced by MOCS or from city agencies relating to discretionary contracts? And does MOCS have any ideas or recommendations to address these challenges? I know that we did multi-year contracts for city council's discretionary. Have we made any progress for other discretionary funding to have multi-year contracts that we needed to fix?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chairwoman. I do have some of the information. Let me see if I have it correctly. For the multi-year discretionary contracts, it looks like we have 1,226 that were cleared for those multi-year contracts that have been registered, which is about 43%. For those that were awarded in those corresponding fiscal years. So as I mentioned earlier, and I will get you the data, Councilmember Stevens, on the specific timeframes, which I don't have, I cannot find in front of me, but decreasing the time by six to 9 months. To your other question, Chair Wan, you may recall, again, those conversations we had year one during the task force conversations. I think there's lots of other opportunities for us both jointly in the council and the administration to improve the process. For those of us, again, the Councilmember Brewer, who's also remembers a process that existed prior to our current process, before the PQL and before all the things that we have now, a lot of those processes were put into place by the council, and for good reason, but there's a bit of a opportunity to sort of start on a blank piece of paper. There's not a lot of rules or regulations in the PBB rules regarding the process for discretionary contracts. So I definitely have more ideas, and we're happy to talk to you about them, prior to my separation.
Right now, the council finance team believes that we have an average of 360 days for a city council contract to be registered. Can you confirm that average length of time it takes for council discretionary contracts to be registered? And has there been any effect on contract registration time since we switched from 1 year to 3 year contracts? And is there a standardized amount of time across agencies that can be prepaid to providers? To your belief, to your knowledge?
In terms of the timeline, do you have the data? Well, I'm trying to pull up the data now, Chair One. What was the second part of your question, Chair One?
So we heard that in average, it takes 360 days for city council contracts to be registered. So the first question is, can you confirm that that is in fact the average time that it takes for council discretionary contracts to be registered? Is it
I'm
really
going to get
almost
that
a year?
data for you, hopefully before the end of the
Okay.
hearing.
Then we want to know, have there been any effect on contract registration time since we switched from 1 year to 3 year contracts?
Yes.
God help us all, I hope so.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't seem to have it right in front of me unless it's hidden in this very large binder that I have, but my recollection was somewhere between 6 to 9 months decrease of time frame.
Okay, that's better. And lastly, for council discretionary contracts, is there a standardized amount across agencies that you believe could be prepaid for providers? An advance payment, or I know that our dear friend, former council member Barron, wanted to do a grant basically for anything under $10 million. Didn't get much traction, but is there anything like that you foresee as possible?
So we definitely have some tools in our current toolbox. For example, I issued a directive recently directing agencies where possible and appropriate to issue higher advances on their discretionary contracts, which is consistent with the current standard human services contract, which has a much higher amount depending on if it's a discretionary contract above or below $20,000. So we've encouraged agency in a recent directive to maximize those higher levels of advances where appropriate. And to your second question, Chair Wan, as you know, we do have regular meetings with staff members from council as a result of, I see Councilmember Stevens has left, but as a result of Intro 514, and I know that the speaker mentioned in our State of the City address potentially doing grants for certain contracts, and so we definitely are looking forward to having some of those conversations and working together to see what's appropriate and where there's appropriate legislation that's needed.
Okay. For November Plan Payment Monitoring Task Force, the November plan included $425,000 to support 5 positions in fiscal year 26 and the out years. These positions were added to a payment monitoring task force, which will focus on improving invoice policies at an agency level with the goal of reducing workloads, improving consistency, and getting vendors paid on time. Have you been able to fill these 5 positions?
Thank you for that question, Chair Wan. We have been actively recruiting and interviewing for those positions. I think we have some candidates that are moving through the process, but we definitely have been working internally with sort of creating the vision for that task force, sort of goals and what we plan to achieve. And as you mentioned, Chair Wan, bringing all of those invoicing actions into Passport, really creating a group that kind of has oversight of the processes, creating reporting and performance management tools that we can both hold agencies accountable and they can manage their processes, and bringing in additional expertise so that we can create invoicing standards and procedures and then monitor that the agencies are actually adhering to those policies and procedures.
Okay, so 0 of those positions have been filled so far. 1 position was filled?
Yes, one position has been filled so far.
And how is this one person doing so far? Have they started?
Yes, they've been
Okay.
actively helping with the backlog initiative and helped us create a lot of those reports that were sent out to the agencies in terms of weekly tracking.
Okay.
Also, they helped build out the reports that were added to Passport that Lisa mentioned earlier. So we developed those reports from the feedback that we got when we analyzed the data of where there are bottlenecks.
Okay, and the November plan included an additional 125,000 in fiscal year 25, increasing to 250,000 in fiscal year 26, and the out years for vendor and agency user training of Passport Release 6. How often are the trainings given, and what do the trainings entail? That's different from before.
Oh, thank you for that question, Chair Wan. I will have to get back to you on a specific number of trainings, but part of what those trainings are focused on is, again, in partnership with council, is ensuring that providers have information that they need to get through the discretionary process. I don't know if we have the stats.
We don't. We have also added training, and we use some of that funding for training environments to help test out to build out the guides, and as they perform these trainings, they could show them how the system works, not in the system. So we needed a training environment for that, and we added that, and we used part of the funding for that.
Okay, and are these trainings in person? Are they online? Are they both, where people can self-service?
Yeah, our sort of model as part of the umbrella of Mox Institute is we actually try to do multiple modalities of training, whether it's in person where appropriate. Sometimes those are in specific partnership with organizations that have relationships in whether it's a particular borough, particular sector. We've done it with umbrella groups, but we also do online trainings, both live, and then, as I mentioned earlier, not everyone has time to go to a specific webinar, so all of those are recorded and then available to our users that are our vendor users, and we push those out through social media. We push those out through our monthly newsletter. And we also have an LMS system for our agency users, so they can do a lot of the self-serve of the content that we've been building up since 2022.
Okay, the adopted plan for this current fiscal year included additional 1.1 million to fund 10 positions. Have you been able to hire for those positions? I believe those were actually internal positions that existed. So could you help confirm that those positions are filled?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wan. That allocation in the budget allowed us to sort of fill the gap where we were losing funding for 10 individuals who were already on staff. So those 10 individuals are still with us.
Okay, and wait, sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, that funding, Chair Wan, was to sort of fill the gap for time-limited funding that we had previously. To support 10 staff lines. And so we're able to keep those full 10 staff lines thanks to that infusion of the budget.
Great. And my last set of questions are about the COLA. So for the cost of living adjustments, we are grateful that that was able to be implemented. How is the COLA implementation going? And do you know the percentage of contracts that have been amended to include the cost of living adjustments?
Thank you, Chair Wan. So first and foremost, I'd say part of how we approached processing our COLA investment of over $740 million over multiple fiscal years was using, where appropriate, our allowance clause. And so as you may remember, in the first year of the administration, we added an allowance clause to contracts, which allows and was intended to reduce the number of amendments needed when there was a change to the contract. So that was sort of the primary way that we were focusing on instituting the COLA. In terms of the numbers, which I do have here somewhere, the way that we did the process in collaboration with OMB was figuring out the appropriate dollar value per contract, per vendor, and then submitting attestations from those providers affirming that the amount that was calculated was accurate. And so I do have a number here, and I think it's over 90% or 80% of those attestations that have been received. %.
So 86% of nonprofits have now had the amendments to include their COLAs for their contract payments?
86% of nonprofit providers completed that attestation or application, essentially
Okay.
affirming that the dollar value calculated by the city is correct for their COLA. And again, the number of amendments, I do not have the number of amendments in front of me. We anticipated not having the need for a high number of amendments because of the allowance clause. And what we also did just at the beginning when we made that announcement last fiscal year, we also instructed agencies to issue an additional advance at the beginning of the fiscal year to allow an additional cushion as they were processing and finalizing the attestations with the providers so that they could get the money out the door for that initial 3% in year one.
So for the remainder, so if only 86% have completed, what outreach is being done for the remainder who also need to complete their attestations?
So the agencies are working very closely with OMB, and in any cases where those attestations are not complete, there is probably sort of a unique set of circumstances to finalizing that process.
When can we expect for the amendments to be made for all, at least for the 86% who've completed their applications for their COLA?
So there will not necessarily necessitate an amendment in every case. So much of that process is done. There still is definitely some of that process that remains, but again, the allowance clause was intended, among other things, to allow sort of flexibility for contracts when there was a change to not necessitate an amendment for every single action. So many of those should be processed through the allowance clause.
Okay, so how many have been processed through the allowance
I don't
clause?
have the number in front of me, Chairwoman.
Okay, we will follow up because we are getting a lot of complaints for the cost of living adjustments and also just processing contract payments. Secondly, there are budget modifications like the indirect cost rate initiative that providers have been waiting on for years. What's the plan to get that backlog cleared?
Thank you for that question. As you know, the administration has committed to the ICR. As you know, we have an ICR process that once a provider you either get the de minimis rate, or if you elect to request a higher rate, that process, once approved, is for 3 years. The ICR rate is extremely important, obviously, for providers to maintain their full budget, and we work very closely with OMB and our agencies to ensure that those are done properly. We actually issued a directive to agencies in the last few weeks, reminding agencies of the process, our commitment to the ICR, and if it hasn't gone out already, there will be a correspondence that goes out to providers as well, alerting them of our directive to agencies.
Okay. I think we will have a lot of follow-up items, but thank you so much for your testimony. We're so grateful for your service, Director Flores, and we will definitely miss you.
Thank
But
you. I
so
appreciate the
much.
partnership. I will miss you as well.
Thank
Thank you.
So this will end the testimony from the agency, and we're going to move on to public comment period. I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a formal government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant at Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak today at the hearing, Please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant at Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearings, which is the fiscal year 26 preliminary budget on contracts. If you have a written testimony or additional written testimony you wish to submit on the record, please provide a copy of the testimony to Sergeant at Arms. You may also email the testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recording will not be accepted. And our first panel is Greg Clem, Lauren Siciliano, Carrie Ann Pauls, and Lisa Rivera. And okay, you can proceed.
Sure, wonderful. Good afternoon, Chair Wan and members of the council. My name is Lauren Siciliano, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Legal Aid Society. Along with my colleagues, I am here today as part of a coalition of public defender and civil legal services nonprofits who provide constitutionally and legally mandated representation to hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers each year. We defend people against incarceration, deportation, and eviction. We connect people to life-saving benefits, housing, and substance and mental health support. We are a lifeline for low-income New Yorkers in need. The services we provide are funded by city contracts and initiatives. While recent changes from the city, such as the allowance clause amendments and the 3-year COLA initiative, have been a step in the right direction, despite these changes, chronic underfunding and mounting contract and payment delays jeopardize our ability to operate, to provide essential services for the New Yorkers who need us most, to hire and retain staff, and to provide and respond to ever-increasing needs. Late payments wreak havoc on nonprofits and the communities we serve. Nonprofits like us start at an extraordinary disadvantage. Not only are our wages lower than those of our government counterparts, especially in experienced positions, but our staff also do not benefit from a government pension. While city agencies start the year with their funding and routinely receive additional allocations for new collective bargaining agreements, healthcare cost increases, and utility and space cost increases, nonprofits like us do not. We are constantly waiting for our funding to be confirmed or for payment for work that has been completed. And perhaps most egregiously, when we then cannot spend all of the money in our contract because it was never confirmed in the first place, or we did not receive it in time, the city takes it back, effectively cutting our funding. Systemic contracting and payment delays exacerbate these fundamental issues at every point in the process. In an increasingly challenging financial context, we're here today to talk about just a few examples of the absolutely critical issues with city contracting and payment that endanger our ability to make payroll, pay vendors, experts, and rent, and to fundamentally continue doing this work. We're grateful for the council's focus on this issue, and I will now turn this over to my colleagues.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Chair Wan, council members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Lisa Rivera, President and CEO of the New York Legal Assistance Group. As you know, and we have repeatedly testified, legal service providers continue to face challenges related to timely payments. While the city owes all legal service providers millions of dollars, we are going on 2 years of being told there are staffing shortages and software issues. Though we are sympathetic to those concerns to a point, the problems have persisted for years without a satisfactory fix. With respect to budgets, despite timely registration of our housing contracts with HRA in FY25, which was a celebrated change, the city changed our funding amounts no less than 3 to 4 times during the fiscal year, adding complexity and delays to the process. While we would all typically welcome increases to the budget, they don't help if we can't actually use the funds in a timely fashion. The change that we received required lengthy back and forth with the city to finalize the amount, which finally occurred in December. The entire process was rife with errors. As for the actual approval process, the agency often requests many revisions, which providers must respond with changes and then resubmit the budget. This cycle repeats multiple times. The earliest some of our organizations started to receive budget approvals was in late January. At NILAG, 9 months into the fiscal year, our first housing budget was approved as I sat here today listening to the testimony. This is not all due to software and staffing shortages. We have submitted budgets that lay dormant in Passport without being approved or denied. Without a budget approved, we can't submit invoices. Without submitting our invoices, we can't get paid. And while we have raised these problems time and time again, it is not until our agencies escalate the issue that we receive movement. The following are some examples of the responses that we receive. Mox has an auto reply that their current response time is 15 to 20 days. We were told to put our patience hat on when we asked about delays. One agency told us to reach out to a specific person for assistance. We did that, but then our service ticket was canceled and we were told to go through the proper ticketing agency to start that process all over again. We have precious few resources because we are underfunded. We are devoting massive amounts of time and resources towards dealing with what issues should be routine city contracting. We understand the struggles MOX, HRA, DCD, and other agencies have had, but ultimately, we are doing critical work that requires responsiveness. New Yorkers, your constituents, our clients, depend on it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Wan and members of council. My name is Greg Clem, the Chief Financial Officer at Legal Services NYC. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. So my colleague Lisa was just describing the budget approval process. However, unfortunately, the challenges don't end after the budgets are approved. When submitting invoices, we face an incredibly onerous and ever-changing review process in order to get reimbursed for the work we perform on city contracts. I say ever-changing because the requirements of the information that we are asked to provide along with invoices often change from month to month. Something that was discussed and settled in prior months is often resurfaced again in future months. As you can imagine, this adds time to the review and payment process. And at this point, the clock has already been ticking for weeks or months on expenses that we have already laid out to perform the work. Once the requirements are cleared up and the invoices are submitted, they will often sit for several weeks without even being touched. At some agencies, and in most cases for us at this table, it's the Office of Civil Justice at DSS, there appears to be not enough staff to keep up with all of the work. All of these things place considerable strain on cash flow, requiring us to seek advances from other funders. And just to underscore that, we have to seek advances from other funders to do work for the city, or make draws on our lines of credit. Another way payments are often delayed is when funding is confirmed late. In our example for indirect cost rate funding, or the ICR, ICR funding is crucial because it provides funding for essential administrative costs that social service orgs need to keep operations running. Organizations currently go through an application process with MOX every 3 years. However, the ICR is often not approved until very late in the fiscal year, or even worse, months after the year has already ended. To help address this issue, as you will note in our recommendations in the written testimony, we urge the city to provide advances of 50% of the ICR initiative based on the prior year's rate. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Carrie Ann Pauls, and I'm the Interim Executive Director at Take Root Justice. Thank you to Chair Wan, the committee, and staff for this opportunity to testify about the ongoing and urgent need to eliminate delays in the city's contracting and payments made to nonprofits. I'd like to thank my colleagues who have testified today, as we all unfortunately share in the same experiences of delays. Currently, and in this moment, in addition to trying to manage while we wait for payments, we are all in the moment where legal services and community organizing nonprofits are under direct attack by the federal administration and struggling with our funding and resources. But at the local level, what our city and the contracting agencies can do is ensure that our funding, what we are awarded, and awarded to serve our communities and your constituents, is paid timely. So a few recommendations on how to make this happen, and thank you so much to Chair Wan and others from the council for championing a number of these. So we'd like to amplify the call for proper funding and staffing for MOX to ensure the oversight and operations of the contracting processes run smoothly. The city should standardize 50% advance payments on all contracts with nonprofits at the beginning of each fiscal year. The greatest payment delays we experience are at the beginning of each contract term, and even when advances are issued, they are only around 25%, which is not enough. Next, the city should allow for bridge loans even when contracts are registered, and make them available at multiple stages during the contracting process so organizations can meet their cash flow shortfalls when the city is still behind on payments. And I'd like to note that even though there are the returnable grant fund loans, those are only so good as when the agencies are actually responsive to those requests. We've experienced extreme delays in any response for our RGF requests. And we'd like to ask the council to pass the proposed legislation that requires the city to cover the interest costs incurred by nonprofits on loans and lines of credit. So thank you again to Chair Wan for being such an ally as we push for better contracting and timely payment on our payments for our sector. We show up every day to fight for the rights of New Yorkers, and to sustain this work, we need the city to pay on time. Thank you so much, and we'd be happy to respond to any questions you all might have.
Thank you so much. I do not have any other questions. Our next panelist is Sophie Jung, Eric Lee, Gloria Kim, and Tara Klein.
Thank you, Chair Won, and the members of the Contracts Committee for the opportunity to testify. Did I press it? Okay.
Yeah, as long as the red light is on.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chair.
Now you're on.
Okay, it was on. Thank you, Chair Won, and the members of the Contracts Committee for the opportunity to testify. My name is Sophie Jung, and I'm the Family Employment Awareness Training Project Manager at the Chinese American Planning Council, CPC, the nation's largest Asian American social service organization. I started at CPC as a part-time staff assisting with the Excluded Workers Fund application process. My main responsibility was to provide language support to potential applicants. One morning, I got a call from a service provider for people with disabilities. The gentleman on the other end of the phone was asking if I could help with a three-way call with a mother that only speaks Chinese. He was in urgent need of some information from her to help with her child's service application. At the end of our session, the mother said, "My son would have lost his medical services if it wasn't for your help today. I'm so grateful that CPC is always here for us." Because we are so heavily reliant and restricted on city contracts and fundings to provide our life-affirming services, we are grateful to testify about issues that impact the communities we serve, and we are grateful to the Council for their leadership on these issues. Last year, the administration announced a historic investment of $741 million as part of a cost of living adjustment for an estimated 80,000 human service workers. This was part of years of tireless advocacy of the Just Pay campaign led by the Human Services Council. And we were thrilled to work with the Council and the administration on this. We need to ensure that the COLA is swiftly implemented to get to all human services workers, and that the implementation is straightforward and simple for providers without impacting programs. We also urge the Council to seek guidance on how unionized staff will be included. By ensuring transparent and swift procurement and robust human services wages that our staff can depend on year after year, we can better serve our community members. Thank you for your time.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Wan and members of the committee and committee staff for allowing me to testify today. My name is Eric Lee. I'm the Director of Public Policy for Volunteers of America, Greater New York. We are one of the region's largest human services providers. We are the 5th largest supportive housing provider, and we also operate shelter for families and individuals, including people fleeing domestic violence. We are a member of Homeless Services United, the Human Services Council, and the Supportive Housing Network of New York. I submitted written testimony, which I will summarize. To date, VOA GNY is owed nearly $40 million of city contracted services stretching as far back as FY17. We've been forced to rely on our line of credit to continue operations, and we've spent approximately $1 million in interest for this fiscal year to cover city delays, and we forecast spending $1.5 million in interest for FY26. To Councilmember Brewer's comment about interest costs, we strongly support Intro 514, which would make the interest rates reimbursable when the city is late paying us. This fiscal strain has become untenable, leading us to delay the opening of one new shelter facility and walk away from another recently awarded contract entirely because we simply cannot afford to carry the cost of operating these programs while payment delays persist. In addition, we still have not been able to implement the Human Services COLA, which the council fought so hard for because the city has not yet released funding for it. The added uncertainty regarding the leadership of MOX further adds to our anxiety and underscores the need for decisive leadership on this issue from the very top. We ask for the committee's support in urging the administration to take emergency action to clear the backlog of pending invoices and Passport, stop recouping advances until payments flow smoothly, and issue additional advances as needed to restore positive cash flow to nonprofits like us so that we can remain full partners in addressing the crisisness of homelessness. Additionally, we urge the council and the administration to increase funding for FY26 city budget staffing for MOX, DSS, DHS, and DOHMH, as well as other city agencies, to approve contract actions and reimbursement for human service providers. VOA GNY has pending contract actions stretching as far back as FY17, which are preventing us from getting paid. This includes the indirect cost rates to cover overhead costs, as well as the cost of living adjustment for our staff from prior fiscal years. These continual delays in procurement processing further restrict our cash flow, which is already hindered by the unwieldy reimbursement process, which only allows us to submit 2 invoices per contract at any given time. City agencies need to be funded to ensure that nonprofit providers' contracting needs are met so that we can focus on providing the services for our community. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Good afternoon, Chair Wan and members of the Council Committee on Contracts. My name is Gloria Kim, and I'm the Director of Policy Research and Impact at the Human Services Council. As MOX has testified previously, they're responsible for overseeing the city's procurement process and leading reform initiatives, but there are a significant amount of pending contracting actions that are preventing providers from getting paid for services they have already provided. This is unsustainable for the sector, especially as they continuously deal with delayed procurement processes, which further exacerbates the cash flow challenges that they face. Also, MOX plays a critical role in implementing the COLA, so the lack of MOX funding has a detrimental impact on the implementation process, leading to workers not receiving the investment in a timely manner. And at a time where so many nonprofits are facing financial issues and workers are reliant on this COLA, funding for MOX is crucial to ensure that providers' contracting needs are met and workers are compensated so that they can focus on providing services to their communities. And now with the announcement of Director Flores' resignation, the sector is very concerned as to how this will impact the procurement process and further exacerbate the delays in payment. So for too long, nonprofits have incurred substantial costs for service delivery before they have a legal right to be paid. So the sector is at a breaking point. The city and its residents ultimately bear the brunt of these problems when highly qualified providers can't afford to take on city contracts, or when those providers must close programs or go out of business altogether because of the financial strains imposed by the city's late payments. And although the city previously cleared the backlog of more than $6 billion in unpaid contracts and amendments, more needs to be done to support the sector. The city needs to hold each agency accountable to pay invoices on time and clear the backlog of indirect and COLA contracting actions. The sector has struggled for decades with the government procurement system to the detriment of the financial health of nonprofits. And although the city has taken on a great effort in creating reforms to address the procurement challenges that nonprofits face, there are real and insurmountable financial hurdles that the current system has placed on providers, which must be resolved so the sector can continue to deliver its programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Chair Wan. Thank you for holding today's hearing. My name is Tara Klein. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy and Advocacy at United Neighborhood Houses. We are an association of settlement houses in New York. So I want to echo a lot of what's already been said. I wanted to say thank you for helping negotiate the COLA agreement last year. That's really significant to supporting the human services workforce and our members. 3% is great, but you can't COLA your way out of long-term disinvestment in the human services sector. And so we really need to be looking at deeper investments. We have a number of proposals on the table we hope you'll take a serious look at, like making sure that folks are paid at parity with similarly titled government workers, and looking at prevailing wage schedules. But I want to really focus right now on the contracting delays and late payments, because this is really urgent, and we know that you care. Like, we're hearing that come out in the back and forth today, and it sounds like Mox cares, and when you listen to them, it sounds like the mayor cares. But when you look at what's happening on the ground, clearly, like, it's not coming across, because things are not getting better, and providers are angry. Okay, and like we really need to address this immediately. You cannot expect nonprofits to be running services without being paid. You wouldn't expect that in any other industry. You wouldn't work without being paid. Folks are taking out loans and paying interest on those loans. They're scaling back services. Some are delaying payroll. It's getting very urgent, and people are very angry, and we really need you to keep fighting with us. I want to just read a quick quote from one of our members. I have a number of others in my written testimony that I'll send in. A settlement house in the Bronx said, "We are experiencing delays in making payments to the vendors who supply essential services for our programs. As a result, we've been forced to reduce the scale of our program events due to the ongoing cash flow challenges. This has impacted our ability to fully execute our planned activities and deliver the quality experiences we aim to provide." We did a quick survey of our members last week to see how much they're owed. 13 of our members responded. Just to give you a snapshot, they're owed $81.6 million collectively. There are more examples in my written testimony. Some are owed $15 million at one organization, $5 million in another. A lot of it comes from DYCD and DOE, but it's really across the board. There's a lot of proposals on the table. We know you have a bill about speeding up about a database. Councilmember Stevens has a bill about timelines. Justin Brannon has a bill about interest. We support all of these efforts. The speaker is talking about some new proposals now, and we have to make sure we're funding MOX and all of the agencies. So lots on the table. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We have a hearing on nonprofit payment delays on April 30th. So I think it'll be really important to have a rally and actually show up to put more pressure on the mayoral admins to pay. It's going to be a multi-agency hearing, so we're going to have other agency commissioners there. Director Flores resigned last week, and it is extremely frustrating that no one's getting paid. And you just heard her testimony. I just asked her in 10 different ways, where else can I fund you? And she said, no, I don't want any funding. And that's been the last 3 years of playing charades where I'm like, blink twice if you need help. But then we can't even get out of them a line item of what we're trying to fund. So we're all in agreement that we have to fund, but if we can't identify what to fund, it's not going to be easy to negotiate funding them more, especially if you have their own agency staff saying, no, we don't want any more money. So it's been extremely difficult. So I wanted to ask you, Gloria, for funding MOX, from your research, is there anything in particular that you want us to fund?
Yes, just definitely getting the staff lines in place so that they can implement these procurement processes and these procurement reforms, and also just overall passport implementation. I mean, we're having members, submit tickets at, the help desk, and they're not getting responses for over 2 weeks at a time. And, during a time where they're not getting any payments, and if they're having passport issues, then, it's a problem for the entire contracting process.
Yeah, we're gonna look into funding the help desk assistants, since there's only 14 of them for the whole entire city of New York. And we've increased the budget lines for hiring, but as you heard them testify, they're not hiring because they're not getting approvals. So it's gonna be really important to have everybody come next month, and there's gonna be multiple bills that are gonna be heard to help with contract payment delays. But I think what Human Services Council was able to do prior to last year for the cost of living adjustment, where you had huge turnout, it was great for the council members because we knew how important the issue was. But I gotta say, the mayoral admin didn't even blink. So that's what we're up against. But we'll keep on trying. Thank you for your patience, and we'll see how it goes. But we're gonna keep on trying. We're gonna pass bills. You know, the mayor will probably veto them, but I think at this point, all of us have had enough. So there are going to be punitive pieces of legislation that are going to be passed. Thank you so much. The next panelists are going to be Jackie Delval, Julian Morel, Ali Forney-Center Galloway, Carlos Cano.
My name is Jackie Del Valle from Take Root Justice and the Stabilizing NYC Coalition, or SNYC. Thank you to Chair Juan and your staff for your leadership. Stabilizing NYC is a $3.7 million city discretionary initiative funding 20 groups, and it's administered through HPD. We combat tenant harassment and preserve affordable housing for New Yorkers who need it most. As of today, late March 2025, none of the multi-year contracts have been registered with the start date of July 1st, 2023. Several groups are still waiting to be paid for their FY23 work. This is unacceptable and immediate action needs to be taken. SNYC groups have done 2 years worth of work, including documenting all the work that they've done and having all invoices ready so that when the contracts do get registered, can actually get paid. And we really need a plan to address the backlog. I heard a little bit of it in mocks and some of the questions, but you know, just like when this kind of kicked off 3 years ago, that was a critical part of what came out of it, was a plan to address the backlog, and also it led to the creation of the multi-year. But let's be honest, that is not performed as expected. How many multi-year contracts has HPD registered? 0. And a lot of the other agencies are just registering and paying them, and groups are just beginning to recoup FY24. So we need to plan again and address the root causes, and we need to start by paying the groups. So advances need to happen automatically, 50% in every contract year, and we need to figure out what are the solutions to actually get advances as part of identifying the root cause and figuring out what created the backlog. You know, Passport really has been bumpy and rolling out. The person that testified before listed some of the issues that people were having, and that continues to plague groups. And just with funding cuts on the horizon and a federal administration hostile to the work of nonprofits, especially those organizing tenants, we cannot continue to be in this position and desperately need the money owed to us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Juan and Council Committee on Contracts. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Galloway, and I serve as the Advocacy Manager at the LA Forney Center, the nation's largest provider of life-saving services to unhoused LGBTQ youth in New York City. The city's broken contracts and reimbursement system threatens our ability to continue this work. Nonprofits are waiting anywhere from 2 to 3 years for reimbursement, making it impossible to plan financially. In 2024 alone, the city owed the LA Forney Center an average of $6 million. Let's lean more into that, what that actually looks like for providers providing housing services. It adds actually to this crisis because providers cannot predict the amount they will receive after submitting vouchers for recoupment. This inconsistency in reimbursement makes it impossible to manage cash flow, plan services, and sustain operations effectively. We need urgent reforms. So what this is looking like is, one, a guaranteed reimbursement timeline. Payments should be processed within 30 to 60 days, not years. A transparent recoupment schedule so providers can manage cash flow and plan voucher services accordingly. Third, a faster provider-centered reimbursement process to prevent delays that jeopardize essential services. And lastly, reform of contract advancements, recoupment, so that will help ensure organizations are not left financially vulnerable. Nonprofits do the work in the city, and this is the work the city should actually be doing. So we need a system that honors and sustains this work, not one that sets us up to fail. Thank you so much, and we look forward to collaborating with you on this.
Thank you, Committee Chair Wan, who's my council member, and other members of the Contracts Committee for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Julia Morales, and I am the Organizing and Advocacy Manager at the Fifth Avenue Committee, FAC. I'm here to discuss how the city contracts have impacted nonprofit groups and CDCs like FAC and our affiliate organizations. FAC is old, and our affiliate organizations over $1 million going back to fiscal year 2022. We rely on this critical funding to provide transformational services and maintaining our affordable housing in Brooklyn. We think that this is unacceptable, and we want to see immediate actions taken. We would like to see a bunch of solutions, including groups should immediately receive a significant portion of their funds and advances from FY24 into FY23. And also, I just want to reiterate, groups should receive an advance of at least 50% of their contracts at the start of the year. We also want to say we receive funding through Stabilizing NYC and also CHIPS. For the past several years, the council has awarded Stabilizing $3.7 million to continue our work, and we're looking for an additional $1.3 million to protect homes, win more building improvements, and strengthen organizing across the city. This coalition has not seen an increase in 6 years, despite inflation and cost of living increases. The last year of the multi-year contract for SNCC members have not had their contracts registered and are still waiting for FY24 and FY25 funds. These contract delays experienced by us nonprofits have made the need for COLA and inflation increases more critical. Particularly on CHIPS. As you all know, CHIPS has been a vital lifeline of New York City's most vulnerable New Yorkers. For over 15 years, over 45 groups worked tirelessly to protect low-income, BIPOC, and immigrant tenants and homeowners from facing displacement. Particularly on CHIPS, we urge the council to act by addressing the contract backlog and ensuring on-time payments and contract approvals by increasing CHIPS funding to $4.95 million in FY 2026. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman. My name is Carlos Cano. I'm the COO of the Center for Family Life in Sunset Park, or CFL. We're a neighborhood-based organization that has been the principal provider of integrated social and human services in the low-income community of Sunset Park for over 45 years. We partner with residents to identify shared goals and implement programs that promote the healthy development of families and children and enrich the quality of life in the neighborhood. This includes family counseling, cultural, educational, and recreational programs at local public schools, adult and youth employment programs, and an emergency storefront for food and advocacy, among other services. CFL engages more than 18,000 children and adults each year at 14 community locations, including our main office, our Family Enrichment Center, and our 12 partner public schools. In order to offer these key services, we partner with several city agencies. While we are grateful to be a trusted partner and manage several contracts, the burden from slow registration and non-payment is crippling. We live with daily anxiety, not knowing where we're going to get paid for services rendered, in some cases over a year ago. It is more critical than ever for us to be able to count on the City of New York to pay us, because we are facing the specter of multiple cuts in federal funding. New York City currently owes us over $5 million. Over $500,000 is for outstanding fiscal year 24 invoices with DYCD. $2.5 million is owed for fiscal year 25 invoices with DYCD, ACS, and CDWP. And nearly $2 million in fiscal year 25 contract is still pending registration with DOE, SBS, and once again, DYCD. CFL is a member of UNH and CAFCA, which together represent a large number of providers across NYC. We stand with both advocacy organizations whose broad membership is being significantly adversely impacted by the registration and payment delays. Thank you for creating a space to share these very serious challenges that put our financial health at risk, and for holding agencies accountable.
Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in April when we have the hearings, especially in support of the bills that the mayoral agencies will fight us on. Thank you so much for your time. The next panelists are Christopher Leon Johnson and Sharon Brown. And then our online people.
Yeah. Hello, Chair Juan. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson, and I'm calling on the City Council to preserve every contract that these nonprofits want. All these nonprofits want. I know that right now we have a speaker of the City Council named Adrian Adil Adams running for New York City Mayor, and she's going to weaponize this budget and weaponize these contracts against these nonprofits as supporter for mayor. I am calling on every nonprofit, every person that is seeking that already have a contract from FY24 and FY23 and FY22 and FY25 to record all conversations with Adrian Adil Adams and every member on her City Council team and every member on her campaign. And if you find any discrepancies, report to the FBI, because a big feeling that this Speaker of the City Council is weaponizing every budget contract application to make them supportive for mayor, and she needs to be reported. Report her campaign to the FBI and the Department of Investigation if you see any discrepancies with her, because she's really corrupt. She knows she has no chance of winning for mayor. Andrew Cuomo is going to win, and I'm calling on the City Council to work with Andrew Cuomo's campaign, because he's going to become the mayor anyway. So there's nothing nobody here can do about it, whether you like it or not. I'm calling on the City Council to really speed up the payments for all the contracts for every nonprofit. They need to get paid faster. Why are they not getting paid faster? What's going on here? And like I said, this is all done by the Speaker of the City Council, Adrian Adil Adams. She is weaponizing the payment processing times to make them supportive for mayor. And I have a big feeling that she's going to say, "Oh, if you want to support my you want your contracts to get sped up faster, you want this contract, you want this payment to get sent out to you, you better support my campaign for mayor." So I'm calling on the City Council. I'm calling on everybody in this political spectrum to record oral conversations, record all her emails, and anybody in her campaign or anybody in her City Council Speaker's office, including that little bozo Tyler Hankerson or Ty Hankerson, try to use his speaker, his boss's leverage to make him support him for City Council. Report his ass to the FBI too. So, like I said, report both of them to the FBI, Ty Hankerson and Adrian D. Adams. Because I said, what's going on here is that she is weaponizing that budget. She's weaponizing I support everybody out here that want their contract to be paid out faster.
Okay,
I support
thank
everybody.
you.
So like I said, support Julie Wan. Thank you. Report Ty Hankerson to the FBI and report Adrian Adams to the FBI. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sharon Brown. Before I start, remember the hostages, release the hostages, let Yahweh's people go, defend Israel. Okay, the contracts have been very problematic. People are getting paid handsomely and they're not fulfilling their contracts. We need to find ways to make contracts with military veterans, military homeless veterans, and seniors. We need to find those who are experts in these fields and give contracts to people who are worthy of these kind of things. Some of the people that have vendor's license could also try to go for some of these contracts. There is a group called CPA or something like that, and the Chinese community have been fighting with them over hospitality work. They don't give them breaks. They are working 24-hour shifts. They're not paying them accurately. They should not have contracts if they continually abuse their workers. So if they're violating the contracts and they're not paying fair wages, they should not have those contracts. They should lose the contract. Even in the middle of the contract, maybe we should start writing in that if they are egregiously violating the contracts, that it can be severed. We can have the law department or someone look into that, because this situation has been going on for a long time. I believe it's CPA or CPA, the Chinese community has rallied about it, and they have been having contract disputes. They have been having all kinds of different things about it, and nothing's happening. If it's happening with them, with people that hold contracts, it's happening on a larger scale. We need to be meticulous and look over who we have with contracts and make sure they're fulfilling their contracts or sever them.
Okay, thank you so much. Our next panelist is Kyung-Soo Kang online. You can now unmute. Kyung-Soo Kang?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Chair Wan and members of the City Council and Committee on Contracts. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of University Settlement. My name is Kyung-Soo Kang, and I am the Grants Contract Administrator. University Settlement has served New Yorkers for 139 years, providing critical human services across our 30 and more sites in Manhattan and Brooklyn. We are deeply grateful for the administration and the City Council's support in implementing COLA increases, reforming the passport system, and introducing multi-year discretionary contracts. While these reforms are steps in the right direction, significant challenges remain, particularly in contract registration and payment processing. City contracts are a lifeline for nonprofits like ours to deliver essential services. However, ongoing delays in contract registration and payment disbursement have created a serious cash flow crisis that to staff furlough and reduce program expenditures. Without timely payments, we are forced to take out high-interest loans to pay staff and maintain services. These loans, while temporarily bridging gaps, ultimately deplete our resources and weaken our long-term financial resilience. The burden of repayment limits our ability to reinvest in programs and sustain essential services. Additionally, while Passport was designed to modernize procurement, inconsistencies in its implementation have created further challenges. Agencies often require vendors to submit documents through both email and Passport with conflicting guidance, and when clarification is needed, the MOC's help desk frequently redirects inquiries back to agencies, leaving vendors without clear directions. This uncertainty hinders our ability to plan and effectively manage contracts. Another critical issue is the absence of automatic notification when contracts become invoiceable. Managing nearly $900,000 in discretionary contracts require us to manually monitor statuses and follow up with agencies diverting resources from direct service delivery. Without timely notification, disbursements are further delayed, exacerbating cash flow challenges. We stand ready to work with the City Council and the administration to create a more transparent and efficient contracting procedure. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. And that was our last testimony. So I hereby say that this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone.